Okay, you're good to go.
All right. It seems like forever since we've had our last meeting, but I'm excited to kind of see everybody. I see names.
Okay, you're good to go.
All right. Okay.
Forever.
Um,
I got it.
Great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And it looks like John Arrington is going to give us a thought or the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, I'm going to pray today. Thanks. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful to be gathered together in this committee to serve our community. We are grateful, Father in heaven, for this area we live in, for the environment we have, and for the people that live here. Father in heaven, we ask that thou might bless us tonight in our discussions, that we may be clear and understand each other's positions and make appropriate decisions. We're thankful for each one of us and the ideas and thoughts that we have. And Father in heaven, we're thankful for this nation and the privileges which we enjoy. And ask that thou might be with us in all of our actions tonight. We humbly pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, my flag's over in the corner, so I'm just going to stand up and face it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
All right. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that flag being sent up there too. I was going to suggest that. I know of another community that's the best way to do it, and nobody has to find one.
We all have one right there available. All right, so I guess we will move on to the consent agenda and consideration to approve the September 23rd, 2020 committee meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look over them? Do we have anybody have any questions, any problems?
I noticed one thing. It's probably not that big of a deal, but in section 6, where it was explaining my comments, I talked about how we should not be spinning our wheels, redoing what other committees are already doing. And it picked up in the type that we should be spinning our wheels. So probably whoever reads it knows what I meant, but if you want to add the not in there, you could.
Glad you brought that up because I was going to bring it up.
Oh.
I knew what you meant.
Okay.
Okay, so when you make a motion, if you'll do that with that change.
Sure. I make a motion that we edit the comments that are recorded from section 6 under my name, Christina Watson, to add the word not as it states that we should be spinning our wheels. Instead, it should say we should not be spinning our wheels.
All right. Do we have anyone?
You want to add your motion that you just approve the minutes as otherwise written?
Sure. And let's add, we'll approve the minutes as otherwise written.
Okay, I'll second that.
Great. So is there any opposed? All right, and the minutes are approved. Thanks, Eric. I still get so nervous. It's only my second one, so I get so nervous. Like, what am I supposed to say? How do I do this right?
We're all friends here.
I know. Well, I appreciate it. And anybody can jump in anytime and offer that help because I really appreciate it. All right, moving on. We will move into the agenda and public comments. It looks like we do have one attendee. So I don't know if we've got any public comments.
I don't see a hand up.
All right, should we just give it a minute? I know it's Brenda. I want to say hi, Brenda. I guess we're good. All right, we will close public comments then and move on to number 3, presentation on what is needed from this committee regarding vesting the general plan map. And I asked John Call if he would help me out a little bit with this. I think at the last meeting, I could feel a little bit of frustration, and even I was starting to wonder, what exactly where our goals are. I think I have it, and then something changes and I realize that I might not quite understand it fully. So after the last meeting, I went and actually quickly met with Lynn, and she spoke with me for a minute about vesting the general plan and really made some things clear to me. And I think the problem we're having is we're making it far too complicated and tedious. And this is why tonight is just a map with 5 sections, and there's nothing special about any section. They're not any rhyme or reason to them. I think we just want to be really broad and look at the map, and we want to start identifying places that we see as a conservation area. We need to start identifying big areas that we see very specifically as something. And it doesn't have to be based off of what it is now. And this is, I think, where I was getting hung up on, maybe building off of what we have now and what's established. And, I mean, that's maybe a good framework, but really we can look at it however we see it. And how I understood it a little bit was we can make a recommendation that we see this area as a conservation area. And it will go to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council. But what that will mean, if it is vested a conservation area, that moving forward, if that land ever wants to be changed from what it sits at now, however that is, wherever that goes down, how far down the road, they'll look at the general plan that's vested. And if it says commercial area, that's their option to zone. If they want to change the zoning from where it sits, it will go into commercial area if that's what it's vested as. Am I explaining this correct? John and Lynn, please jump in if I'm.
Yeah, I think you're doing exactly a great job, Stephanie. That
Okay.
the 2 options are you leave it as it's currently zoned, or you change it to the zone that the general plan says it is. There's no in between. It's either or. And that way you're not displacing the existing users or making them awkward, as they are there, but you've set it clear. In the future, it will be commercial, or it will be this type of residential.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so I realized that in residential, we've got lots of different zones. In commercial, there's lots of different zones. And I think those are something we can go back if we want to get more in depth. But I think right now we need to start with a look at the map. We need to identify conservation areas, commercial areas, and residential areas split into 2 parts, high density and lower density, and kind of get a broad overview of how we see it based on those 4 sections. And I'd like us to do that tonight with some motions as we all agree, yes, this should be a conservation area. That we can start getting the ball rolling and maybe end this year, because this will be our last meeting of the year. Feeling like, okay, we know what we're doing, maybe get our confidence back. I feel like we stumbled a little bit, so I'd like us to get our confidence back. I mean, we really kicked butt on the our planning. We did a great job. So I think we've stumbled a little here, but I'd like us to end this year with, feeling accomplished and understanding really what we're doing, and getting a general broad layout of how we see the city broken up into those 4 main sections. Does anybody have any questions, John?
Yeah, Stephanie, does this kind of go back to that meeting we had in February where we had 4 groups?
I think that that light bulb went off in my head last week too. I was like, I get what John was doing. I get what we were doing now. I think that they are kind of tied together. Am I wrong, John, or not?
Yeah, that's right. It's to kind of look at the city and say, what color, what densities do we see where? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to that other thing that John brought up, but then people can buy and sell open space back and forth.
Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that we'll start diving into, next year, I think.
Yeah.
I think right now I'd like just to, take this map and look at section 1, how it sits, and let's discuss. Do you see a conservation area in this part, in this big section 1? Do you, and kind of see what are some things that we want to vest and recommend vesting, to our planning commission and get that all rolling in discussion going, and then we can go back and start looking at those and breaking them down if we want. But right now, I think we're taking too tiny of bites out of a really big project that we're not seeing anything. We need to break it down a little bit. Is that?
Well, as far as conservation areas, I think that project we started, all 4 of them had basically a lot to do with what conservation we wanted up on that north end.
Yeah, and that's, and that's where we want to start talking. Do we, does anybody have any more questions on vesting the general plan and just kind of moving forward, at least with tonight, so that we can get some things done and, accomplished for the year towards vesting the general plan and feel like we know where we're going? I can't see. I don't know if my viewing's wrong. Sorry, that's actually Grant. I don't know why it's calling me. Now I've lost everybody.
Lynn, do we have any of those maps that show what people's thoughts were up on that area so we can get some idea?
Well, I think that we can just, I think we have some new, we can find those to reference them, but I bet we can just look at it and figure it out.
Okay.
I think right now, if that's, I have totally lost my Zoom. Grant, what did you do? I can hear you all. I can't see anybody anymore.
John, there also wasn't much consensus on those maps. So I'm not sure that it would be helpful to look at those.
On the north end, I would agree, especially there. Okay.
Oh, hey, got you all back. All right. So anybody else? Are we good? Well, yeah, you can ask questions, as we go on, but I'd like to move on then. All right, let's move on to number 4, unless John Call, you have anything to add?
No, I think you've hit the highlights of exactly what we're talking about vesting, and it's great.
Okay. All right. So thanks. Good. Yeah, when it kind of clicked, like I was like, oh, okay, we are definitely making this harder than it needs to be. So we're going to move on to number 4, the discussion regarding the general plan map. And so Lynn's got the map pulled up here. I would just like us to focus on section 1 at the moment. And does anybody see anything in this area, any area that we want to talk about? I think, John, I know that you want to talk about the foothills. I would like to talk about the foothills for sure as well.
Is your intent to, in these sections, really kind of boil it down to, like right now we have hillside zoning and residential low density, but are you wanting to dive into even deeper of what type of zones we want to see up there?
No, I don't think so. I think we want to decide if we see a conservation area, we identify it and mark that. If we see residential, we identify that and mark that, and we mark it either high or low density. And I think we keep it to those 4 sections, and that's it tonight. so we can kind of get a broad spectrum, and then we can go back and start taking those apart. What do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So let me add something. You know, one of the things that just staff has talked about, and I'm going to draw on this little map, is this is the power corridor, this red line.
No, you gotta, we're not seeing your screen. There you go.
Oh,
And everything above that, in a lot of ways, the staff would probably encourage that to be conservation. And so that's the type of thing I think Stephanie's looking for, is some rough estimates on, hey, we see this area as conservation. And I think that's one that the staff would probably recommend to this group as a staff recommendation for a conservation area for sure. And there might be others in this area as well.
Thanks. Yes, I mean, that's kind of exactly it. And maybe we can identify, if we imagine conservation going below, how far below do we see that? And where maybe would we mark that, okay, we see this area conservation, and then low density housing starting at this point in this area.
first of all, I agree with that area that the staff suggests. And somebody that's familiar with the lower part may be able to suggest other conservation areas. I'm not that much familiar with the landscape.
My personal feelings is I'd like to see it go a little bit further down below the power lines at conservation easement. I do have worries about water table and our foothills and protecting those some, but I don't know that I really quite have an exact of how far down I go. So that's where I, if anybody has any input on that.
The power corridor over on the east side is up on the bench. So you've got some steep slope below that. So naturally, if you went below, you're not going to have buildable area anywhere around that anyway.
Okay.
Pretty much the only place in the city above the corridor where there's actually buildable area would be that middle section where it's kind of going on an angle. And there's a bunch of different parcels. So naturally, the other areas would probably be left as that. If we wanted to go down below, like anywhere there's steep slopes, obviously would make sense. But I would also, if we're looking at conservation in a way of saying we're willing to trade some development rights, I would say that large area to the, almost right in the middle. It looks like it's one giant piece parcel.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's up on top of that bench up there. And I know there's a development agreement on that, kind of vesting some density there that's maybe higher than what we want to see, most people. So if that was an area you highlighted that the density could be taken from, then that would benefit the people who have it vested there. And so there'd be a benefit to maybe conserve that. Because one thing to think about in conserving is the stuff over on the east side is slated as HP3, which is 3-acre lots.
Mm-hmm.
So most people, in my opinion, wouldn't oppose that because that's pretty open. But when you get over to that middle section, it's vested as 10,000 square foot lots, or 1/4-acre lots.
Yeah, and that's where the Nebo Avenue is.
It's west of that, west of the cove, that big parcel, all the way to the power lines. Look, that giant piece right in the middle. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's vested as 10,000 square foot lots all the way up there. And if we were to offer a conservation area there to say, well, then they could trade those small lots, which have 4 units to the acre or 5 units to the acre on, vested, and move them somewhere else in the city, then that's something that's probably a worthwhile trade that somebody would say, okay, yeah, we'll leave that as open ground. So I think that's an area that could be benefited from that.
Okay, so John just circled it? No.
So I think these are the properties that are subject to that development agreement. The property in the middle, I don't believe has a development agreement associated with it at this point.
Oh,
but
I thought it was all that stuff in the middle that clear back when they bought it from Lakeview Heights.
Right, and Lakeview Heights is over near the red circles.
Well, it's directly above that one blue line all the way down the middle goes right down through the middle of it.
Just to the east of the 2 circles?
Yeah, east of the 2 circles and west of the cove. that stuff that you've highlighted is that Northview Estates and stuff. And above there, I don't know, but anyway, that if that's really the case, some of those higher up areas, if they're vested as those smaller lots, that might be worth something looking at to say, hey, if we are going to create this developer rights or conservation area where they could take and say, we'll leave that as open space and gain the additional units somewhere else in the city, that might be a worthwhile location to take them from if everybody likes that, keeping things open up on the hill, all the way up by the power lines.
So this is Rob Scott. Just from the zoning standpoint, we don't allow development on slopes above 20%. So as you get more into refining these areas in that, I think we do have a slope map. I don't know we have it available for us tonight, but as part of the refinement and getting down to the nitty gritty, that would probably be something that the committee should take a look at.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So if we were to right now roughly look at this and decide what we would want to say, we would like to see this as a conservation area. Would we, what does everybody think? I mean, that top circle, oh, hi, Julie, you have a baby with you. How fun.
I would say whether it's that top circle or to the what we're looking at is from the right of that, an area maybe that big as well, but something that if we were to implement that seems to make sense, where if there's some vesting up there that's higher density, I mean, it's not high density, but it's quarter acre lot stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, hey, we'd like that to be bigger lots or more open. We offer the trade and say, if you leave that open, then you'll get the density somewhere else in the city. And it could be a worthwhile trade for a developer.
I really like what Eric's saying, especially if it's that big centerpiece where you see the flow, the blue lines. That's water that's coming down. Those are away, those are, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, where the water comes down and stuff like that. That would be a really good area to just, keep open, and then where, move it to another part of the city that maybe wouldn't be as affected by it.
Yeah, I agree.
John, can you circle the other part we're talking about? Isn't it to the east of that? I mean, both. Yeah, is that what we're talking about now? Yeah.
Yeah, I would, in my mind's eye, I would look at it and say, if you take that line from Nebo Drive, the cove, the top road of the cove, and kind of continue it west until it hits that steep slope, which is that little strip that you see right at the top of the yellow. From there down, kind of keeping it with the development lot size that whatever it is now is fine. But then
Like
as you
lower density,
as you get higher up, then that's where you'd start offering it. Because that's a big chunk. I mean, if we wanted to offer it, but that's a lot of density relocation for elsewhere in the city. But I think in my head, if the top of the cove was a natural barrier to where everything above that was trying to be bigger lots and more open, I would be amenable to that. I think that would be neat. But
I agree with that. I really like that. I was worried that everybody would be like, no, you can't have
No,
that.
I think that's fine too.
But I also think that we can decide, again, we don't need to get into small details. We can pick a big area and we can send it to Planning Commission and they can look at it, and if we've picked too big of an area for conservation easement, we'll revisit that. But I think that we need to, so I like that idea. I like that whole top area. Anybody else?
Can I,
On that?
Lynn, will you let me share my screen real quick?
Yep.
I just want to make it clear what I'm basing my information on for the development agreement. So if you click on sharing, there's a little arrow right next to sharing.
Yeah.
You should be able to say all panelists.
Yeah, I don't have the little arrow. Usually on a meeting I do, but not on a webinar. And I'm going to base or to advanced. Yeah, there's nothing there.
Okay, well, just so we're clear, I just pulled up the development agreement, and the area that is encompassed by the development agreement is this area. I mean, it's not a perfect thing. It goes into that center section a little, but from what I can see based on the maps I'm looking at, it's the western edge of the hillside, not the middle. I just didn't want there to be some confusion that there's an additional development agreement out there somewhere.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So from what I remember, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but from what I remember when we talked about these kind of trades and agreements, there was a sacrifice that we had to make. If we give away so much land, then we give a bonus to whoever's trading. So correct me if I'm wrong, but my point is just that we're not going to want to be excessive, right, in our selections here of conservation areas, because it's going to be somewhat of a sacrifice for the city, right?
I think so. I think there's going to be a little give and take with it. So we want to be really thoughtful in it and not just, crazy in conserving every piece of land that's available right now.
Yeah, you have to, there's a piece that as we talked about before, there's a piece you take, and there's a piece that a giving piece and a receiving piece. And probably the easiest way to remember is if the giving piece is 4 units to the acre and the receiving piece is 4 units to the acre, now that receiving piece can go up to 8 units and the giving piece goes down to 0. So you're right, Christina, in the sense that we have to be sure, when we want to set that up, it's always hard because it's easy to identify the areas we want to conserve, but it's very difficult to find the areas that you want to increase. And so I think that's the struggle on the Planning Commission in the past, why it never completed. There's the hash marks on the map, but we've never finished the process to create that actually as an ordinance, just simply because it's difficult to determine where we give the receiving side to increase density.
Right. And even when we do figure out how much we want to give and where we only have so much to give up, where we're giving up twice as much as we're taking, then we're not going to want to pick a handful of areas that we want to conserve, because that means double the handful of amount somewhere that we're going to have to give up, right?
Yeah. And typically, to do it in a way that you would maybe say, hey, if we can conserve 100 acres up there on the hillside, and we can put that down to an area that might be, that might be 20 acres or 40 acres down along Washington, somewhere that's going to be medium density anyway. And you look and say it might be going from 12 units to 16 units, the effect isn't nearly as severe. So you might let additional units in a multifamily project go in order to conserve the hillside, when it was going to be a multifamily project anyway. You're saying, well, we'll allow some additional units so we can conserve the hillside. And those are the tough decisions to make. But what I've seen in areas in other cities where it seems to work is usually in the types like that, where you're trading it into an area that's going to be somewhat dense already, and you just let it get a little bit more dense so that it's not as impactful on the rest of the city.
Right. So is it then that we're giving up a double amount of units or a double amount of acres? Because that makes a big difference.
You're not giving up double of anything. It's a 1-for-1 trade. So if you take 1 unit off that's buildable on one parcel, you can add it somewhere else. But if it's 4 units to the acre in one property, and somebody gives up 10 acres, that's 40 units. And then the receiving piece is allowed to have 4 units to the acre under its natural zoning. Now you can add however many units that is deemed to be able to add. There's 40 units that could be, if you only had 1 little acre and say, oh, we'll allow that to be double, then you could only increase it by double. It's not saying you could pack 40 of them on 1 acre. But I think that kind of gets into the whole zoning and the agreement that we decide to do, or the city decides to do. That's probably way more in depth than what we really need to cover.
Hey,
Yeah.
John, what area of this that we're identifying is annexed into the city currently?
My understanding is the only portion that hasn't been annexed into the city yet is right here.
I'm sorry, John, is what?
The portion that hasn't been annexed is inside the red box.
Okay, so to trade for that, to annex into the city, because right now in the county, they're limited to 1 acre lots. Right?
Yeah.
So the trade on that might be, we'll give you more density below what we want to conserve as we annex it into the city, because we have no obligation to annex it into the city.
And
Why
he
could-
wants
Why
higher-
could that be part of the agreement?
Well, it can be part of the agreement. I think that if by identifying that property, for example, as a potential conservation / maybe even sending and receiving zone, then we can do the detailed works that with maybe even the landowner to say, this is where we see the conservation easement, this is where we see the density bonus, to make it so that it's the same number of units that would have been on those 200 acres, but they're in a smaller area to allow for more open space.
I think there is another part down by where I am. It's just south of the 7-Eleven that's unannexed as well, if I'm correct.
Yeah, they're looking at, that's where the storage units are being looked at.
Right. So the storage units only takes up part of that section though, right?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So one thing I'd like us to stay focused on doing a big, like, I know that there's going to be discussion of the land swaps and all of that. And I don't know that we need to, that's not something I think we need to worry about. Or I like the idea though that Eric's giving us so we could see what that possibility is, what that means. If we get identified our conservation areas, our commercial areas, our high density, our low density, as those talks or discussions start to happen with developers, they will have, that'll come to where they look at the map and where we have identified areas that are higher density. And if those plans and swap work. So I don't know that we necessarily have to say, okay, we want to make this a conservation area. What are we willing to trade? I don't think that we need to worry about that. Let's just say we would like to see this a conservation area, and then we'll go from there, and we will pick out areas, just general areas that we can see higher density and lower density housing, and as those developments and such start to happen and work out, we will have already identified those areas, and they will be, the council will see them, planning commission, so they'll have an idea of where those discussions can happen. Yes, everybody's muted.
That
Okay.
means everybody agrees.
Okay, I'm like, I feel like I'm
I
talking
like
to
the
myself.
broad brush strokes approach.
Yeah, I
Section
think I'd
everybody
like
would
tonight.
to see it.
Yeah, tonight I
Conservation
think we
possibly,
just,
and leave it as residential. And that's probably good, and we move to the next, huh?
yes, and then we can go back, and start to maybe look at more of those detailed things next year as we get as a broad brush layout, like Eric said, I'd like, get that down. And then, Christina, I know that you have concerns about the high density and you've expressed it, especially if we all put it all down by where you're at. And I agree, that's, as we get to that area, that's where we can look and say, we want lower density housing here, or maybe there's a conservation area by you that we see that we mark. Do you know what I'm saying? And we just,
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad that I brought that up. This, I don't serve on this committee just as a personal benefit to myself. And
No,
so
but
it shouldn't be.
no, but that's a concern, because I don't think that when you say that, it's just you in your area that's thinking that. It's,
Right.
I mean, like, that's, we all come from different parts of the city. It's okay to say, I have this concern, and we can be aware of it and look at it, and we'll look at how the city fits. But, I get what you're saying. As we're saying, well, if we make this conservation, that means we have to move and that's tough. And so I think if we can get some areas laid out as higher density, lower density, conservation, then it makes it easier to start really seeing those come to fruition and understanding, okay, maybe we could put higher density here. So
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a balance all over the city, but thank you.
Yeah. So, but I would love us to get through it and make some motions and get some accomplishments done on moving forward. So, I think we've identified an area that we all see as a conservation area. And I guess above the Nebo Avenue, kind of along up there in the foothills. And the biggest question, I guess, is where the development agreement is already over there, John, over kind of under by the one. And where we cut that off from there.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think it'd still be good for this group to identify this area, because occasionally developers will come back in and ask for a revision to the agreement, or sometimes these agreements expire. This agreement was entered into in the early 2000s, and it might have expired by now, or it might be close to expiring. And so there might be a reason to look at what does this group envision for that area.
Okay. So if we, I think the biggest thing here is that to make a motion or some, I don't know if you can make a, circle kind of where we're discussing, how would we do that? How would that best work, do you think, to move forward?
So if you up at the top of your screen, Stephanie, there's a thing that says view options.
Okay.
And then down a little bit down, it says annotate, and it'll pop up a little drawing.
Oh.
And you can change the color and things so that you could, and in fact, any of the panelists can do this.
That would be great, because then we're all working on the map, and if everybody doing that's
well, and
give them a stash.
I was going to say you got to be careful because it could get messy really quick. But if a couple people are talking about, hey, I really think this area we should put some houses because it's kind of on that flat, but this area where it's steeper, we want it to, maybe that's a great for conservation, or I don't, that type of thing.
Okay.
And with it being recorded, we can go back and do some screenshots to make sure that we are capturing everything as it's discussed.
Okay, I'm going to attempt this, and I made my color yellow since you're red. We're kind of thinking. Okay, what are we? What am I just? Did I just make that way too big?
No, for example, if you're thinking that's the area we want to look at conservation, then that's a good start, because we're talking in these broad overviews that, hey, let's conserve that area. And then below it, maybe we're looking at single family.
I agree with that concept. Let's get something out there. And
okay, so this section we haven't talked about. What do we got here? What is anybody thinking here? Let's see. The divide is clear down here. So we're still. Do you guys see the conservation coming? Let's see. In my head, I'm kind of thinking here. I don't, because I can see this developing. I don't want to get too high up. But there's already, a little neighborhood here that I can see coming along, but I know it gets pretty steep right in here.
from my understanding of the area, I'm fine with that.
Anybody else?
I think it looks good.
Let's see. Conservation area. Okay. Does anybody want to see me add a little more? Are we thinking that's a good conservation area?
I think for now, that's good for where that gives us direction for our discussion as as you're running to really just kind of highlight things.
Okay. So I'm wondering then, John, if we, now that we've kind of got a little momentum and we're getting it, would it be best to just do this whole map and then we can make a motion recommending our map moving forward, or should we recommend it in sections? How?
I think, if we're talking in broad strokes, I think maybe do the whole map, and
Okay.
then we can bring back the sub areas to get the finer details done as, for the next meeting.
Okay.
Now, I think that's a good progress. Let's get something done that we can then consider smaller areas later.
Okay. So
Before we move, can I just ask real quick on this section that you just highlighted? I know there's some trails up there. So I would hope that could stay in the conservation area, but I don't know on this map, exactly. Not that we're going to turn this picture in that you just drew, but whenever we come to fine tune it a little bit more, we should keep those trails in the conservation area.
I agree. And we do have trails going throughout the city, and I'd love to get out our trails map and see, make sure that we're planning good connectivity and really using our foothills and trails and some of those assets that we have, that people come from all, quite far to get into the mountains. Okay, so let's look at the rest of map of 1. So we've still got, does anybody see anything different in here? I personally see maybe a lower density housing. But it can be split up. I'm not sure. I'm gonna just mark it unless anybody sees anything different. And I'll connect them after as we go down. I just, like I said, I broke them up into sections just to make it easier for us to just, look at parts. So lower density. Low density residential. The colors are crazy because that's just what's coming up. Oh, residential housing. Okay. Is everybody good with how we've got number 1 sitting? Yes.
Okay, Steph, as I move the map, your annotations don't move. So.
Okay. Okay. So I'll add them as you move it then. Let's see. Okay. That at least worked for the discussion, and I think we all have an idea. Okay, move it up. So number 2. It's pretty developed, but so that comes down into Lomond View. So this is where we've got, okay, So we do know that we'd like this little area as a park. Oh my gosh. Sorry. And I think that we kind of already even made that recommendation and discussion. Right? We saw this as a park. This is the Bicentennial Park. This corner. And I believe we all, well, we did make the recommendation 300. To close Loman View Drive and divert traffic down this road. So I think we've established we see this as a park. Am I right?
It might be a little bigger than what was suggested, but I think you're right that it was.
Yeah, that the area goes further south than I think we're
Okay.
more in line than your squiggly line is.
I was trying to color in Bicentennial Park, I know.
And I think that there again, in generalities, you're in the right area of what the group talked about. So
Okay,
if there's no major objection to that concept, then we can broaden out
we'll
the
just
rest
leave,
of the area.
okay, so we'll just leave this there. Oh my heck, what have I got it on now? Okay. So, does anybody see any higher density or mixed use? I think high density mixed use, we can also say together in discussing, you know, identifying areas that are a higher density mixed use area. Does anybody see anywhere down here that they think that that could possibly fit or go? Okay. So
Are we just talking about section 2 right now, or the
just section
map?
2? Just section 2. Section 2 is the only thing we're focusing on. And again, don't really worry about what's there now. Let's just look at, okay, so if this is Bicentennial Park and we turn this kind of to a city center, could we maybe see, this is just an example, this area as mixed use, higher density? I mean, I'm talking 20 years, whatever. Could that be a possibility if there was some change there? Is that something anybody sees in this area? Does that fit? You know, and I'm trying to be open-minded outside of the, no, it just needs to stay the same, the less density, the better. I'm trying to be realistic of like, in the future, if there were changes, could there be more mixed use and higher density a little bit closer to Washington? Is that a possibility? Do you guys, so these two little spots I carved out, if this was a blank sheet of paper and we were building a map, I could possibly see that in those two areas.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That, you know, you've got mixed use or your higher density uses. I wouldn't want to see commercial any higher up than any of those areas. You know, I can see maybe some a little bit higher above Bicentennial Park over there. That might be near Washington between Alberta and Loman View. But again, you know, looking down 30 years from now, but other than that, you know, that's the hard part when you look at it and say, well, just leave it the way it is and we're happy, just low density residential and move on. But it is more the plan for 30 years and saying, where are you going to put it?
Well, and I also see, I've also learned that kind of if we're not willing to give a little bit, we get surprised and get things where we don't want them.
I think that my opinion is that high density and mixed use is best to be near the commercial areas of the city for sure. But I just would hate that we trap ourselves into not having enough opportunities for commercial. So right on our main streets and our main intersections, I would say let's be sure we save enough spaces for commercial so that our city can grow in all different areas at the same time. But then right next to those commercial areas that we put all of our high density and our mixed use kind of one after another, just borderline.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So what are your thoughts on these two areas, Christina? With, you know, and the reason I personally see more higher density mixed use is because if this becomes kind of a bit of a city center park or you know, I imagine that's where a little bit of foot traffic and a little bit of that idea of walkable would be.
Yeah, I love it. I love the idea of the mixed use and the high density walkable to the park there. It looks like the square on the right, is that where the current 7-Eleven is across from Lee's?
Right here? Yes. And right now, I think they are a lot of apartment buildings, older homes right in through here. Some of these houses are already commercial.
So I would just say right on the corner, you know, that's our biggest intersection in the city. So anything right touching that center of that intersection, in my opinion, should be commercial. But that doesn't mean the whole block that you circle. Sorry, this is so hard to do over Zoom.
I know it is. Okay.
Well, and I'm just one voice, so I don't know what everyone else thinks.
I know I'm not hearing anybody else. I am hearing concern, and I understand. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking she was up here, but I know Brenda's listening and has always been involved in what we're doing. And her property is right here, and she's got a beautiful farm. And so I understand that concern in there. If Loman View comes up, anybody else? Lynn, on the key, what is these marked out? The black stuff here, I can't remember. I can't scan up to see. Oh, you know what? I have a printed map in front of me. Don't mind me. Potential conservation area. Okay. So who identified that before? Just curious. I want to know, you know, if we, like, how long ago was that identified as conservation, possible conservation area?
If I remember right, back when we updated the plan and the last time it was updated, when we had the charrettes and had public involved, we had them put sticky notes on the map of areas that they might think could be a conservation area. I think that's kind of might be how that was derived.
Okay.
Was it conservation so that we could have something like a park there?
No, it was more of when we talked about like trading development rights, a sending or receiving zone. So going along with the dashed area that's in the bottom on 4, the two would go together. One might be receiving and one might be giving. So I don't know, you know, which is which. If that area was like, oh, hey, we could put more density there and keep open space down over on the other one more.
So it could be gray just because people wanted to save that for a high density for a trade.
It could be as much that as conservation. So,
well, and I think on the map, the areas that are crosshatched are the more agricultural areas of the city where there's active agricultural operations. And I think that might have been part of the conversation as well, of saving that part of the city's land use.
Yeah, I think back when we did the general plan before, I think that was kind of the intention. That is agricultural. I don't know if, I kind of think we need to work to preserve some open space or some, larger lots and green space, not just up on the hillside, but interspersed through the city.
I agree.
And so over there on the west side of that crosshatched area, that's still agricultural and large lots. We've lost part of that already.
We have.
On that crosshatched area, and that's already gone. But I don't know if we want to look at trying to preserve a little bit more open space over there, where people can actually see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, is there any way to build onto Bicentennial, like with some of that area, as
it's a little too far from. I think it's a little too far from Bicentennial Park.
A little too far off.
But it's up closer to Lomanview Park. It's not very far from Lomanview.
So what area, Don, would you
it'd be probably the west end of that crosshatched area, where there's still some farms and hayfields in there.
Do you see my yellow?
Right there, right below Alberta Drive. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've got Lomanview Park just on the east or north side of Alberta Drive right
here.
Yeah.
John, is that area RE20 now? What is it zone currently?
I believe it is RE20.
A portion of that is now in the Pheasant View subdivision that was just rezoned to R110. And then the westernmost portion is R110, and then the middle is still a vacant field, if that makes sense.
And again, I don't know that what's there now matters. This could be 30, whatever years down the road, especially with the new development going up. But
if you vest the plan, they only have the option of leaving it as John just stated, or conservation, right? If we identify it that way. So
yeah,
it would seem like to me R110 is not a big lot that would keep that residential. But John, you're saying there's just a small sliver left that's RE20?
Sorry, my mute button doesn't like to unclick. So Dan Carter owns this piece that's in red that has not been developed. It's still agricultural. It's this piece in purple that is being developed right now as houses.
And is Carter
any part of that still Weber County? Does that matter as we're doing this?
It does not matter because it's in our declaration, our annexation declaration. And so it matters in the sense that the city has more leverage as it comes into the city, but it shouldn't matter in the sense of long-term planning what we want it to be. So that will help the city make that decision as it comes in.
Okay. So, so calling that area conservation area, even though some of it's already developed, does anybody see a problem with that? Just with saying, look, we see this as a possible conservation area. Do I need to change my line?
question, if we were just to vest it as is, even though, you know, if, or to keep it in large lots rather, not necessarily conservation, can we do that through the vesting process?
Yeah, I think if there's specific areas that we want to identify as something, that's what we're doing. So we mark off an area and say, we see this as low density housing, and we want to mark that area off and make that known.
Okay.
That's what I'm imagining. So in knowing that, would you, instead of doing a conservation area here, would you rather mark a bigger section and just say low density housing?
Well, some of that already is, but again, you know, we're looking in the future. I think yeah, some of that we should keep that way. Say to break up all of the high density areas, so it's not just one great big mass of houses on the outside, you know, in the middle of the city with a little bit of low density around the fringes. I mean, you know, I think it would look better and act better if it was just spread out a little bit.
Okay. So let's see, this is Washington. Further than that, do you want to go higher up?
Oh, that looks good.
Okay, so Alberta and all right in here. And I actually think that's kind of, yeah, so I like that. So we've got park here, and we'll say this, what did you think? Conservation or low density housing?
I would just say low density.
Low density housing. Okay. I see what John was saying, how this can easily become. Does anybody else see anything in some sections that they want to talk about in section 2? Section, let's see. Okay, so we're, and we keep the rest of this just kind of, so if we don't mark a section, we're okay with how it sits and just housing.
Isn't it that if we leave it like it sits, well, like it is now, it's situation as it is now, which means it's still eligible for people trying to rezone.
So well, how does that work, John?
I think for the general discussion tonight, like in section 3, if we say, you know what, we're fairly comfortable with the way it looks.
Yeah.
And we'll come back with some details about which properties are already zoned for which type of low density zones there are, which properties are vacant, and then the group can kind of focus on those vacant properties and say, is this an R112 or is it an R110 or an R18? And we can do that by the vacant properties to finish out the map in detail.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, and so in one thing too, so if we make an area, if we see an area as conservation but it's already developed, and that happens, so that what that would mean, what down the future, however long that takes, that someone else buys that land, or the owners of that land want to rezone, they would come and look at it and it would be conservation. How does that work, John?
So, if the landowners want it to be conservation, then we've got to, we need to have that conservation land swap deal set up and ready to go in order to facilitate that. Sorry, did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Kind of, yeah. So, but then otherwise, it simply just stays at the zone it's at.
Yeah, the city does
basically
not have to rezone it.
Yeah, so basically vesting means if we call something a conservation area and it's already developed, that's fine. It has no impact unless they at some point want to rezone it. And then their option would be into whatever we vest it as, or just keeping it how it is.
Right. So if they did not want to participate in a development right program, which is that conservation program, then they are locked into the RE20 or whatever zone is currently in place on their property.
Okay. Okay, so is everybody good with 2? Does anybody else have a section here in 2 that they want to discuss? We've kind of looked at this. We think the rest should just kind of stay the same as residential. Okay, we are going to move to 3 then. So I know there's some area here that I see as conservation. Let's see, I would like, this is where I could be making it much bigger than I need to right now. I could be like just land grabbing for myself in my mind, conservation area. So, but I'm going to start with it and then we'll dwindle it down as you guys discuss. I'd rather start and say, let's keep the, So I imagine this area here will be, is it already under an agreement, John? Just what, this is there's the,
that most of that is in the county still.
Okay.
And most of it exceeds the 20% slope that Rob was talking about earlier. There are some areas that are not 20 or that are less than 20%, but there's not going to be many buildings allowed in that area, at least on the eastern edge, because it's just too steep.
Okay. So I'm going to bring this up, the potential of a possible gondola. I just wonder, is there any way to somehow protect some of this area and market? Oh, my computer.
So it'd be the same concept. If the general plan shows a density that would not support that type of development, then in order to get that type of density, the whole general plan would have to be rewritten, which is a much more complicated process.
Okay. And I also could be the only one that's like, got that a little bit going through my head. And, so I want everybody to make sure that you're speaking up. And if that's, because I'm not just trying to push my plan, but I'm going to start it with this area.
So Steph, I think that, like John said, a lot of this is still in the county, which we have no control over. Part of this is the equestrian park and the recycle pit and that area to the south of the equestrian park, which is city property. And so, that's a good place to put into the conservation easement. And I like the idea of putting the stuff in the county, but John, just a question that's going through my head. Can we actually vest county land?
No, we, just like the county can't tell us what to zone property, we can't tell them. We actually, when it comes to zoning power, are equal in the eyes of the state.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I thought that's what it was, but I just needed it clarified. And so a lot of this in the top end of 3, I believe, is in the county. So maybe what we need is for the North Ogden Canyon Road down in that area to be the conservation easement.
Do you see further west than my yellow line here? Do you see all the way
No,
down?
I don't, because as you look at that, I believe a lot of that is Olaf O'Piken's land, correct, John? Correct me if I'm right or wrong. I'm not.
I believe that's the Hall Tree or the
The
Hall
Hall
brothers that
Tree,
own
thank
that
you.
area.
Yeah.
Right
So
here.
that's Hall Trees. Yeah. So I think, and a little bit more towards, I don't know how far up towards North Ogden Canyon is, but I think where you know, the lower part, I think is good to keep in the conservation easement, at least for me.
Okay, well, I can see, so here's Harrison. So it's going to come across and it's eventually, well, okay, so anything above it, we've got right here is the, well, let's, okay. Trying to get my bearings.
So the equestrian park is in the lower section.
Right
of
here,
that.
yeah. The way the land is built, it really doesn't lend to residential in here anyway, because
It
this
doesn't.
drops off right here. So I almost want to say like this. Conservation area here. I think it's okay if we though identify it as that's what we would prefer, even though it isn't county. I mean, because we can't
Yeah.
technically zone it, but we can still identify it as, okay, this land we see as a conservation.
Yeah, I can see that, you know, because at some point, I don't know, it's going to be annexed in, I guess, some
Yeah,
of it.
we at
So.
least have a, okay, so this area, maybe I'll do a different color because yellow is. Guys, I'm a doodler if you can't tell by me with this mouse. Okay, that is our conservation area in number 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And do we see any areas that we want to specifically call out as low density housing versus where it sits? Or do you see high density mixed use possibly fitting in any of this area in number 3?
Just at the bottom of the gondola.
Just, just under the gondola? Is that what you said? What did you say?
Yeah, I'm just teasing.
Yeah, let's just put that on.
In my opinion, I think 3, the map where it's mostly all built out. I mean, even where you highlighted, part of that area is already developed. Almost everything from Mountain Road West is already developed now. So there's just a little sliver east of that. I drew a blue line in there. Pretty much everything west of that, I would almost say leave the same, and everything east, because I would like to make sure we keep around the bottom or the mouth of that canyon open. You know, that, and that's really from, if you look at it from the canyon kind of towards the equestrian area, that's in front of all that is about where there's only some flat enough ground that you could develop. So it's important we probably protect that. As you get closer to the divide, it's too steep anyway, and up above the equestrian park obviously is steep.
Yeah, and I think we want to be careful too with flooding and, you know, all of that can happen. I know there's the new basin up here. So, okay, so this is conservation, and the rest of 3, we really just kind of see as it sits, the residential and the zoning as it sits right now, we're good with. Okay. We're going to move on to 4 unless anybody's got a comment. All right. Let me erase my sections. All right, so 4, I think we ought to start to the west. That is where we had a lot of discussion last meeting and the meeting before. We were getting a little bit of a headway on some some visions there. So I would like to start. I wish there was just a fresh clear. Oh wait, there is a fresh clear button. Okay. Based off of some of the work that we did do the last 2 meetings, I would like to see. No, it's, where do we talk about? Right here, correct? Almost up to here, this little spot of land. I could see that as mixed use, higher density. And I say that commercial mixed use, maybe more that. How would you say that? I like the commercial. I personally would prefer it more commercial, but based off of the discussion that I've heard, I felt that a lot of you could see mixed use in that area.
It's just like to see it stay as commercial. That's kind of what we spotted. It is in a commercial area.
Right. And I think sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Christina.
I was just going to say, I think we decided that the city council is thinking about commercial for that area anyway. And so it would be hard. We'd have to convince them first, right?
Okay. Do we
I don't know. That's what I'm remembering, but maybe I'm remembering wrong.
Hey,
I
Steph, this is
remember Ryan saying that. I know that Ryan had expressed that. Ryan?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
A little bit. You're a little fuzzy, but
Okay, hold on. I'm on my phone and I don't know how to do Zoom on the phone. Without getting into too much detail, last night we talked a little. And 5 out of 5 council members are not in favor of mixed use in that area.
okay. So commercial it is.
It would take a lot of convincing to put that there.
And I don't think that anybody here was really set on that. I just thought maybe it seemed like some liked the idea. So I didn't want to necessarily push that out. But I agree. I like commercial for all of that area, especially that was kind of one of the big pushes to sell that for the pond. And okay, so we've got this is commercial. Oh, I'm sorry. That's so awful. Okay. It doesn't move for me, but I think that you guys know where it's supposed to be. It's close enough. Okay, so it's hard to tell on here. Is the pool is this is where Patriot Point is going to be, correct? Right.
Where the orange color is, I believe, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Patriot Point will be, what is the blue along in here? Am I?
The blue is the pool.
Okay. You put that in there. It just all of a sudden appeared. I was like, there's the pool.
Patriot Point
Is not quite that far down then.
is this property in darker red.
Yes. Okay. Now I've got my bearings. So we see this commercial, this Patriot Point, we've got the pool. So do you guys, again, we're talking future. Where Patriot Point is, do we still see that as mixed use? I mean, I guess that's not necessarily mixed use. It might have a little bit of commercial, but I actually could see that more mixed use with more commercial in it, especially with the pool right here. And if this is commercial, that's a thought I'm having. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
What is it now? I mean,
So here's the
Patriot-
pool.
is Patriot Point RE10 or?
It's the I
PC.
want to thank you. I'm like CBD zone. That's not it. MPC. So it's going to be townhomes. I think it's mostly townhomes, some apartments.
And it averages out to, I think, around 12 units to the acre. But it is a mix of some apartments, townhomes, and then some twin homes, which, you know, are homes that share one wall.
And then it will have the pond park right here.
Yep.
And I believe it has just a small amount of commercial a little bit north from that, correct?
I think
Yes, right along 2550 north.
Yeah, right here. So future, I could see this being more commercial, especially if this is a city park. And this is the pool. I could really see more businesses being in that area somewhere down the future, depending on how that goes. Personally, I'd rather see that kind of surrounding a public park with a pond than. So I don't know. Thoughts? Do we want to just keep it mixed use?
So just north of that whole section is commercial, right? On our plan.
This section right here, yes. And so, and then this is the pool with the parking lot, the fire station, and then the Montessori schools right here. Here's Maverick, and then these are homes, these are townhomes, apartments. See, I can see all of this becoming mixed use.
Well, the nice thing is if we label it mixed use, we can have commercial and high density together, right?
Yeah, I could, yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. So what if we go this as mixed use? Mixed use, higher density.
If we do that, then does each individual property need to have a little bit of high density and a little bit of commercial, or how does that work?
I think what would happen is if somewhere in the future, you know, all those apartments come down, that land gets sold and a developer wants to do something new, he would have to look at what we've got and we would have mixed use, high density. So that he would, you know, depending on how we start to dial it in, that would be his option. That would be what he could change it to.
And in the general plan, we can define, you know, this might be mixed use category A, which anticipates commercial on the road with higher density behind, so that someone couldn't put an apartment unit right on the corner unless the group felt like maybe that was appropriate in this area. But we can bring back some scenarios for that.
That would be something we'd come back to. So right now we'll say,
Right.
you know, this whole area, we either see strictly commercial or we can mark off a section and say, you know, maybe we see, oh, sorry, I'm on the eraser still. We say this is commercial. And then behind it, we see mixed use, higher density. But we want to say that along Washington is strictly commercial. You know, we could do that.
That would be my vote. But then also with the strictly commercial right along 2700 as well.
Yeah,
Like
okay. So this blue, let me try to make it good, is commercial. And I may have it back a little bit far, but we kind of have an idea right along Washington. Commercial. And then this we could see as mixed use, higher density here. Okay. I'm not an artist. How does everybody see that? Okay, I'm going to assume that no unmuting means that we're good. Let's jump across the street. Do we see anything changing here? This is all commercial. Right, well, the city center is here, correct? And the library. So it looks more like that, commercial. And then we've got higher density behind it, correct? Do we see, okay,
I'm all right with both those because I think the high density is already pretty much that already, isn't it, built out?
yeah, but again, it doesn't matter what's built out, how does it fit? So my thought is, yeah, keeping higher density. I don't know that I say mixed use necessarily fits on this side more than higher density. That way the plan, you know, it kind of transitions naturally so that that's in my mind.
Well, some of those east are RE20 lots too. You know, as you get more towards the mountain.
Okay.
So you kind of got like, you've got the city offices, if I'm not mistaken, and then you've got those homes that are right behind it. And then as they hit about Fruitland Drive,
Mm-hmm.
the properties become a lot, some of them become along 2600 anyway, are larger density properties. And then you've got, you know, what Johnny Hansen is building, those are a little bit larger lots. So I think the way it's set up right now is good. But I think on the east end there, where the little blanket area is, we might want to, that stays more of the, you know, lower density, because a lot of those some of those homes around there have pretty good sized yards, and of course this takes in Barker Park.
Yeah,
This
so I
area.
was thinking, so if we go here, this section, see where I've got my line here?
Mhm.
We say that higher density and then up lower density. So that we've
Yeah.
got a transition of commercial, mixed use, higher density to lower density. And then we can kind of break that down into smaller bits as we, you know, move on with the discussion. But that gives,
I agree.
you know, kind of a feel to a transition. So it's transitioning from commercial, the higher density to, you know, it's not putting apartments in the suburbs. Sorry, that was too easy.
I like that idea, Steph, but I'm just curious about the crosshatched areas. Is that what was previously decided as conservation? Do we want to talk about that? Or is that kind of what you were saying anyway?
Yeah. So do you see a conservation up in this? Barker Park is a big, I mean, this is a big area that's already going to be established as a park. So we do have that right in the middle of it. Does anybody see anything else around that? I mean, this, what do we got here? And coming down, this is the area that we've been hitting at as conservation areas too. I think this is let's see, yet this is already being built, some of this. This is already being built right here. Low density. So conservation up here, no.
I mean, if we can designate it as RE20 or the bigger lots,
Density.
maybe that does all that it needs. But I feel like Julie was saying, there's several farms in that area, and I would hate for them to lose their farms, but maybe that wouldn't happen anyway.
Well, if we indicate this area up here, higher density or lower density, I think that we should do against the mountain again, conservation area. I'm not sure. I don't think they can build any higher than this neighborhood anyway. This is Mayor Berube. Oh, this house, let's take out this house right here.
I'd say you zone it as a dump.
Let's turn this one into a fancy little shop of sorts. I don't know. Okay, so conservation easement up here. It can't be built on anyway. What about here, guys? This circle right here.
I'm with Christina. I think that needs to stay like your low density, your RE20. Because
Okay.
a lot of those homes up there have, some of them have certainly some big lots.
Okay.
You know, maybe you could take it down from that to like an R12 or something like that. But I think that needs to stay as, larger lots.
Okay. And again, I think that we'll go through and so how I kind of see this is once we get these big areas, we can start taking all the areas we've marked as low density, and work it out from there. We can go back and say, hey, we've done this. Okay, so we've got Barker Park here that's already there. So we're just going to say above this line, low density.
Yeah.
Except for this section here would be conservation. There, you can't build on it anyway. My only question is this circle here. Can you guys see my mouse? No. Here. See where I just put the X?
Yeah, we can't see your mouse, but we can see when you mark.
Okay, see in my head, I'm pointing with my mouse. You're all following my mouse. So the big X at the bottom, right here, this one, that's my question. This circle there, do we want to lump that into the conservation or into the low density?
I would say the low density because you already have homes in and around there.
Okay.
At least for me, it would be. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Okay. John and Lynn, do you guys understand my markings and my scribbles in the discussion?
Lynn's got it.
She's married to a dog.
Yeah, no, I think we've got it. Plus, we can come back to the recording as well if we have some additional questions as we help.
You're all gonna be just staring at it. Okay, wait and see where the blue mark comes next. That's what she's talking about.
I think we've got it.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to 5. Everybody good with 4? We've got commercial. Okay, I'm going to change my color. Pink. Commercial here. And commercial here.
Okay, are you down on 5?
I'm on 4. I'm summing up 4.
Okay.
Okay, so I just made pink marks around commercial. I'm going to pull it over here. Commercial. I'm going to do red mixed use. Okay. And lowered, and then I'll go green high density. Oh, you can't see that at all. Green high density. And then blue low density. And that yellow with the X is conservation. Yes? And section 4 is done. Actually, but it goes clear back here. I would just say we extend our plan. Commercial. Mixed use.
I think that blue line is the annexation boundary. So where the number 4 is actually Harrisville.
Okay,
I
well,
think you're good.
well, I just marked Harrisville, what they're doing.
Excellent.
right.
We'll send them a letter.
Sounds good. This is what we have just vested for you. All right, 5 guys, I feel good. Like we have some momentum and I think it'll be much easier to go back and discuss now that we've got ourselves into some big marks. Okay, so number 5, we want to go establish, first of all, that we like commercial along Washington. Yes, okay, gonna do that. Oh, I just don't know how far back to go. However, we've got mixed use, Village at Prominence Point here and here, but we still want commercial along Washington, correct? I think so. On with Cooperstown, I was in and out of that meeting. Did they have commercial right here along Washington in that plan?
They had one building and then a portion of one of the apartments was on the northern edge, but there is an office building. It's a 1-story or kind of 1.5 story, I think.
Okay. Well, I think we can still say we'd prefer all along Washington commercial, so that in the future, plans like that come, they have to do commercial along Washington and then the housing behind it. Yeah, no, anybody?
Right. And we can label that however we want. Like John was saying earlier, we could call it mixed use and just say with a note on it that the commercial needs to be along Washington.
Okay, so commercial is blocked out. Okay, so we've got Village at Prominence Point, which is higher density. Here. And that comes along here. And then we've got the low density behind it.
It's actually between 1700 and 1900, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, here's 1700.
It's that big pink area.
It's the pink area.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going back.
Hey,
All right. Here's Village at Prominence Point. Okay, and here's Cooperstown. Right?
Yes.
in that bottom right corner.
Okay, but we still want this commercial here. So we've got mixed use here. And what's along in here? I'm not familiar with it. I haven't. What road is this, right? Oh, I forget. I'm touching it with my mouse. Gosh. Okay. Northwest of Village at Prominence Point. What is that road that runs?
2000 or 1900 north. And
Okay,
then
what
north of that
runs
is
north and
2000.
south? And what runs north and south? What's the
150.
Okay, so what is just east of 150 along there?
That is Mystery Meadows. That's,
Homes.
or you're talking above 1900?
Yes, above 1900. So what? South of
it-
1900.
It looks similar. It's large lots, single homes. They're 1 and 2 acre parcels, some of them.
Okay.
And then
So-
the pink area is lock it up storage.
So my thoughts, future, based on where we've come, I see that as mixed use higher density. Not, I'm talking further down, just keeping the flow and the fill of commercial, mixed use, low density, and cutting and so like west back here is low density. And maybe here with Village at Prominence Point is possibly mixed use, higher density. Christina, I don't know where you live in this map of things, but I know it's in this area. And so but again, I'm just trying to feel like,
Yeah.
further down the road,
Right.
start getting some kind of a flow that
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Right now, there's a lot of single family homes, like RE20, RE10.
and they would stay that way for as long as until someone wants to tear it down and develop it. So I don't see that as even an issue for many, many years, if that makes sense. Like that's, unless we've got lots in there, that's when it would be like, okay.
I wonder, yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm just trying to brainstorm right now. I wonder if just south of Prominence Point would be would be good for that kind of thing, mixed use.
I see that as here as well. I almost kind of have started seeing it like with commercial, mixed use, higher density, lower density, building out of Washington.
Yeah, I think 150 East would be that big defining line.
Yeah.
Going east to west, but that area south of Prominence Point on the west of 150 is all, that big parcel there is owned by the school. They're going to build a school there. So.
Okay. That feels like a natural barrier for high density and lower density.
Yeah, I like what you've marked off. I would just, my vote personally is, let's see, at 2000 and north of 2000 to keep the single family, because there's so much in there right now already. But at right, but everything below that, the mixed use, I don't know, just an idea.
Okay, and again, like in saying that we could see that mixed use higher density doesn't mean that that's what it becomes now or anything. It's, if someone ever bought a group of those homes and wanted to tear them down and build something, that would be their option. They could stay what it is now, or they could go to what we have it. And so it's like, does that make sense? So it's not like, oh, these homes are going to eventually go away and just become mixed use. They're all.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm not trying to explain it. I'm not trying to be like, so it's not a big deal. Let's just put a 7-Eleven there. No, I'm realizing that this is really, really just kind of planning out possibilities, because
yeah, I almost feel like
homes and they're not going to be touched until,
Right. Yeah, I get it. I think it would work out fine either way, like you're saying. I almost wish that.
What if we mark that spot like with the question, residential to be, I don't know that we necessarily have to, because I'm not familiar with it. So I can't even envision it in my head.
And I think, it's a fairly new development. I'd be in favor of just leaving it what it is.
Okay. Without
making even an option to change in the future. Just my personal opinion.
Okay, well, then that's why we're having this discussion, and we have to say it. We have to say exactly where we're coming from, or we won't get anywhere. Okay, so we're gonna keep this. I'm marking it in now. Can you all see me? The same, and I'm gonna change my color. And we're going to say this. Can you see that? will be mixed use. Oops. And Eric, where was the school going?
It goes just west of your green line at the bottom there.
Here. Correct?
Just above that long rectangle piece right above your green mark there.
Right here. That one?
Yeah.
Okay. So that feels like a pretty natural break between and lower residential right here. That is a big fat T, I think, if y'all look at it. Lower residential here. Okay, I'm gonna clear, should I just clear this? Or do you all get where I'm at in my scribblings?
I'm following.
I think we're following. I think we're good to move to the other side of Washington.
Okay. Okay, so the green area is mixed use, high density. The scribbly areas stay the same. Low density is on the other side of the school west. Then we've got our,
Real quick
yeah,
on this before we move over to the other side. So where they're wanting to put the storage units, right now we put that as mixed use with commercial on Washington. So what would that do to them as they unannex or annex back into from out of our city into our city boundaries?
I'm not sure.
Hopefully not allow storage units.
Hey, did I just hear you say that?
Yeah, I was like, those aren't mixed use. And
I've been opposed to that from the beginning.
That's great.
and especially with the school going right there, that makes it even more like, no.
Exactly my point too.
Okay, so then we've got Washington and commercial area. So I kind of feel the same on the discussion of doing from this white line and west, possible mixed use, higher density. Any thoughts?
I mean, it's so hard to envision it. Again, you can see where all the little tiny lots are in there. It's a suburb in there. It's definitely thick residential. They're not brand new houses, but it's hard to imagine it all being wiped out.
Yeah, and and I don't know, but I think the thing that I'm realizing is that if we get this in place, though, when that happens, we've kind of laid out a plan for the city to be, and so nobody's going to come and do that unless they know what we're doing, and it's going to. We're not trying to make this area up here something that it won't fit. We're not trying it. We've got kind of a plan that flows, that works well for.
So Steph, I don't know. This seems like a good place for swapping upper at the north end of North Ogden into. Yeah. So rather than make it mixed use, I would just make it a neighborhood. It's kind of like a 18.
Well, and when we do, so would you say lower density? I mean, or higher, or a higher density?
So I think what Julie's saying is, if you make it a single family residential and then put in the transferable development right overlay, then if people want more density or different types of uses, then they have to buy the density from the conservation areas.
Yeah, okay. So that's a designation that we can make. I kind of missed that. I didn't realize we could make that. I figured we'd just say this is higher density, and then that would happen based on that. But I mean, I like that because I think that would work there.
Thanks, John, for explaining it. I think that's a really good place kind of, make it as with that designation. In fact, trying to kind of look, and we could even take that whole area right there. This is just me speaking. And I don't care if everybody disapproves, because that's why we have these meetings.
Exactly. So just
And for me, I think that's a good place where we put the conservation overlay, because there already is a lot of density in there to begin with. They're your regular R18 lots, I believe. So, they're just a regular lot that, that maybe this would be a good place where you could build the homes where people could afford to live.
yeah. Should we go
Yes.
higher?
I don't know that we need.
2100 is it's a pretty busy road.
Mm-hmm.
This is Green Acres, right?
I believe so.
Yes, yes,
Maybe
it is.
So these are smaller lots.
you could just make that line to line up with Monroe, which is maybe a block further east, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right here. Yes, it's this one, isn't
I-
it? No, where is it?
Yeah.
Where is Monroe? So we'll say Monroe below. Okay, wait, it's gonna go right. Is this one Monroe? Which is our connector? Come on, guys. It's this one. That's gonna be Monroe, correct?
It's 800 east.
Okay, so I think, on the right one, because this is 800, but I think it's right there. Because I know it connects to this neighborhood, the lower one. Ryan, do you know? Because you live right in here. Is he still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Am I hitting in the general area with this white line that I'm drawing as Monroe, right?
I think so.
It's 725 east, and then it drops down. So you're close.
Okay. We get the idea though, and we'll take that one straight down. So Monroe and below is higher density housing with the transferable agreement area. Like we see that as a great transferable area with higher density.
Yeah, I think that works because that property a lot of it's been developed now south of 1700, but we got to remember, we do want to include some empty ground or vacant ground in the overlay for that transferable rights.
Okay.
Because if we want to be able to get that space on the mountain, wherever else it is, to be conserved, we want to make sure that that it could be used instead of waiting, 20 or 30 years to where people decide they can afford to buy a bunch of houses and tear them down. We do, we want to make it available so that, because more than likely the empty ground on the hill will get bought to develop before people want to tear houses down.
Okay, so am I being a little bit too, if I say, what if we go down Monroe to 1700 and up to Mountain and below as transferable?
That's
Like
what I was
how?
just going to ask, is if we could include the whole bottom little orange part in there. Eric, you most probably know better than anybody. It is being developed down there, I know, so maybe that's the best way to go.
Yeah, a lot of that open space, that big piece you see in the middle, I believe is, well, I can't remember if that's what's being developed now or not. I don't remember where that church is over there, but I think that can work. But one, thinking of those development rights transfer, it's a possibility that we could put it, also overlay that part on the west side of Washington from 1500 north to 1700 north, or maybe only to like 1800, only half that ground. So then we maybe designate it as we only want it as like an R110 zone, but it will allow it to go increase to higher density with development rights. So now we've given it an open piece of ground and we haven't zoned it as such high density right to begin with.
Okay. Yeah, so I like that idea. And if we have a designated area that will allow us you know, that transferable and give us what we're looking for to make conservation areas. Okay, I'm gonna scribble this out so I can start over and see. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sean, can you answer the door? Sorry, guys. Okay. I'm going to clear it out. Okay, so I'm going to draw in our commercial. That's the commercial. Now, Eric, where were you seeing transferable rights on the west side? You
Well,
gotta
Steph, you should mark in the school so that we know that's in there, so that we don't plan this for the school.
And
So it's this, that
school is this one. John, are you drawn with me? Are you drawing the blue?
I drew that blue as
Okay.
where you could do that development transfer right receiving zone.
I gotcha. Okay. Would we go all the way to here though? To 1700?
You could. I mean, whether we wanted to go all the way up there or if there was some of that you wanted to leave as more of a mixed use, you know, you could bump it up all the way to 1700. I guess that would work too. And that way, you know, the idea is giving it somewhere there can be some kind of enticing location for somebody to give up some of that ground we want as conserved somewhere.
Well, I would say we go all the way up to 1700 just and make that line kind of the mixed use transferable, you know, a natural barrier between the two.
So is that transferable land then it's basically guaranteed to be high density though, or can we label it mixed use?
I don't know. How does that work, guys? If we started lower, but put the, you know, transferable.
So we could do a similar thing that says, you know, there's two ways you could say in the front, we're going to let commercial no matter what. In the back, we're going to let low density and then have them transfer in the development rights for the higher density. Or you could have two different type of development receiving zones. One that allows for some rights for commercial use and some rights for increased residential use. The first option is easier because you're identifying where you want the commercial to go. But you could also allow for increase. If someone wanted to put an office building in somewhere behind Washington, they could trade some residential rights for that office space, if that makes sense.
And we can specify how big we want the lots to be on this trade?
It's harder to specify I mean, you could say the max density allowed would be X number per, so that would be that type of an approach.
But if okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say, could we specify some kind of blending where it starts out commercial or office space and then it's kind of the higher and then the lower in the back?
Yes, we could. It would just be some additional language that talks about, you know, that if they're moving density for the whole piece, that there's a transition to single family as you move all the way to the other end.
Sorry, just curious how it all works. I don't know.
No, I'm still learning this too. So we'll just designate from 1700 and down as the transferable. And then as we go back into detailing, we can kind of look at this area and what we can imagine and how that works. We could we'll just do one meeting that's all on that. Because I don't understand it I don't understand it so much either. Okay, so I'm going to make this mark from Monroe, and I almost want to say Monroe can just be our natural barrier of the lower density to the higher density transition. But we'll take this one to 1700 up to Mountain Road as our transferable right here. All of this area. Just do this. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, as the receiving zone, correct?
Receiving zone.
And the spot that Eric brought up on the west side is also a receiving zone?
Yes, this as well.
So my only concern with that is that if we can specify what type of zones they are as receiving zones, then that's fine. But if it all ends up being high density, then I feel like we're putting all our receiving zones in the same part of the city. But if we can designate which kind of, like I was talking about with the blending, if we can designate and particularly separate that, then it won't matter that all the receiving zones is in the same.
Well, and I think how it works is we actually zone it higher, like lower density. And then when the receiving zone, it'll be an option for them, and then the density goes up. So I don't know that we necessarily need it to be high density, but it's higher. And it should connect with what we did in 4 right here. We did this all higher mixed use. So it still offers with that flow.
Right.
We're going to designate it specifically as the receiving zone.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then we'll go from here up will be higher density. Actually, right here, higher density. And do we see above Mountain Road? Is there much development up there now? There is a little neighborhood here, isn't there? So I think it's okay to keep above Mountain Road low density in this area because it kind of comes down further from the mountain. Instead, I don't know that there's a need to do conservation there, because there is this line, this mark here. Can you guys see where I'm making it? The green up here above Mountain Road to the far right. Can everybody? Okay, I'm assuming you're all nodding at me. So below it, I don't know that we need to make it conservation, but above it, we'll do the conservation. All right.
Good.
We just did the whole map, you guys. And I think it feels, I think I like where we're at. How about you guys? Do we feel like we have a good layout overview of the city as far as high residential, low residential, conservation, commercial? We've even got our receiving zones marked.
I really like it, and staff, I really appreciate your effort in keeping us organized tonight.
Well, thanks. I was just getting confused, and I felt like we needed to finish out this year.
Yeah, we
finally what we're doing, and with some accomplishments and some things done. So
we finally got something presentable, I think.
Yeah, I think we're good. I can even actually probably go back through and draw on a map and get this done. So, do we have anything else before we move? So John, what do you recommend? Do we want a motion that we move forward with what the plans we've come out, or do we, I guess it's the end of the year. Do we just, what's your recommendation here?
So there's no requirement that this be the final document. There's I mean, this isn't the final map, so you don't have to adopt it by motion. It'd probably be good to maybe come back with the revisions in better detail,
Okay,
and then the committee can see the map and look at it prior to voting on it, since it's a lot to take in one meeting.
yeah, I agree. And I think that's great. And I can go through with Lynn and get it laid out in a way that we can look at it and see it, get rid of our 4 or 5, get rid of those, and add in kind of what we've discussed and get it emailed to everybody. So when we come back at the first of the year, we can look at it and make any changes if we see any tweaks, or vote on it at that point and go from there.
I would agree with that function.
I think it would be nice to just kind of drive around some of this that we talked about too before we
Yeah.
vote on it.
Well, if I can get this map done, I'll try to get it emailed to everybody, not like well before, so we can look at it and maybe drive around to get an idea and get a feel for it.
I like to drive around before I go to work in the morning. So if you can get it out by 6 tomorrow morning, that'd be good.
No, I actually tonight have to finish the Black Friday Smith and Edwards ad. So
Hey, well, Thomas, I think that answers the dilemma the police have had. They've seen somebody, they thought it was maybe drunk driving that early in the morning, but I'll just tell them it's you.
Well, I don't have my glasses on in the morning, so it could have been me.
All right. Well, thanks for solving that mystery.
all right, guys, then we are going to move on to committee, staff, mayor comments. So anybody in the committee, does anybody have any comments?
I just have one thing.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I I think Commissioner Thomas was correct about the property. And I misunderstood. I thought it ended before it went all the way to the east to the cove. I knew it went to the edge of the property, but it is basically everything west of the cove is part of a development agreement that doesn't expire until 2030. So
All right.
if you go back to the top, it's where you see Nebo Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Everything west of there is part of that development agreement. It's not just the area I identified. And it's not just the middle piece, it's the whole area.
West of Nebo Avenue
Yeah.
and just straight over.
Yeah, so it's basically
All the
this
way up to the
whole,
power lines.
it's that whole piece.
Oh, yay.
John, has that been annexed into the city yet, though?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Wasn't sure if it had
I
or not.
think the Marriott property is this, right?
He is the one that owns all of that. That's under the development agreement.
They're held by different entities, but the controlling entity is Marriott Development of one sort or another. So everything that's in the green and everything that's in the red is owned by that family.
What's the one that's not under a development agreement though, that it's come back for the last couple of years with is that in the green that I put?
Yeah, it's the top of the green
Okay.
in that second red box.
Okay.
So
And that's not annexed yet.
No.
So sorry, I just wanted to clarify since
But
I
we can
gave
still
bad information.
But we can still say that that's what we would like to see that as. And then if when that development agreement comes to an end, that's kind of what it would go to if they don't do anything. But because the development agreement is already done and in place, we have no control over that.
Right. It's essentially that's their existing zoning is that HP1 in the development agreement.
Okay.
I thought they were waiting on water, a reservoir or something. Is that not?
No, they have both secondary water and culinary water up there at this point. The second box needs a reservoir. The one that hasn't been annexed yet, it still needs water, culinary water to be developed.
So it may be sometime then.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we should still call it what we, what, as we see it, as the conservation area. Whatever's in place now is in place, and I think we realize we can't, that is what it is, but we're still establishing something. If that doesn't come to fruition, or, whatever happens in the future, we're still establishing that, which I think is good.
I think that's a great idea. And with the HP1 too, that has a lot more, slope stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it does restrict somewhat, but I like the idea of just saying that's what we want and then going from, then making the adjustments as we go. I think it's easier to do it now and say that than to change our mind, change our minds and say, no, we're just going to do this little bit,
Yeah. Okay. Any other staff comments? We've got.
So I just want to be clear, you're not going to meet in November or December, and your next meeting will be January 27th.
Okay.
And John and I talked earlier, and he kind of had an idea of maybe something that you might want to consider for the next couple of months. John?
I wondered if, since the committee's not meeting, if it'd be good for us to, in addition to driving around, but also to review the existing general plan and look for some of those items that maybe we should move to an appendix, or things that we feel are left out of the kind of the vision of the city moving forward, so that we can make the full document amendment and get it, presented to the council and planning commission in the coming year.
That's a great idea, because that general plan is big and we need to start. So if we all started going through it and so what I'm doing first is going through and marking pages that I don't think need to necessarily be in the general plan. It can be filed away.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think everyone can approach it in their own way, because the goal is that's going to be one of the next steps that's coming, that everybody's familiar enough with the document that we don't then have to read it at that point, that we're kind of ready for it when that discussion comes in, 3 or 4 months or whatever it is.
Yeah, I would love to see it so that any resident can open it and not be overwhelmed, be able to find what they want and know what they're looking at.
Hey, Steph, this is Neil.
Yes.
I like that idea. I've always proposed simplicity, because I think we have to remember who our audience is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there was a lot of effort put into that original general plan and the modifications. I don't know why we couldn't use that as our starting point, our jump off basis, and modify that so we don't start from scratch.
Yeah.
So I think becoming familiar with it and, say these are the basic backbone, these are the things we need to eliminate or change, might move this along a little bit quicker, because even though there's some things in there that are a little bit quirky, I think there's some good things in there too.
Oh, for sure.
Ought to be carried forward. So I think that's a good suggestion made by Lynn and John.
Well, and like the maps that are in there now, those are all, great. I think we can just dwindle it down to the real important things, so that when someone wants to find the zoning map, you're not going through, you can on the website. I realize that there is, but if you pull up the general plan, it's just so massive. If we can just get rid of those papers and put them like in an appendix, make them available to the community, but the actual general plan, when you open it, has the important maps, the zoning, what the zoning means, and the vesting, if that's how we continue to move forward. Just simple and easy.
Steph, I think we need to remember we have everybody's email. So if we're looking at something and we have a question, put it out to the committee. We can still email and talk that way. So if we've got a question, it's not a case of, I have to wait till January. Will I remember it then? just put it out there and see what people have to say. You know, stay communicated and connected.
Yeah.
So that, you know, we know what's going on.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll send an updated list. We've had some changes in the committee, and so I'll send you an updated list probably tomorrow.
And she's going to put in an email address that I'm using because my other one, I can't figure it out. Been on the phone with, I got it. Anyway, we'll get an updated list so we can do that. I'll get a map to everybody with what we discussed tonight. And we can start going through the general plan. Christina?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. So this map that we're trying to zone and plan, are all of these ideas that we've talked about not going to take effect until we publish the new general plan next year?
I don't know. I imagine if we come back in January and we make a motion based on the map we went through today, that will go forward to the planning commission. And once they agree with it, or, you know, they vote on it, I think it's in place.
I like that.
I think the general plan is going to be a bit by bit process. And will go into effect, you know, as we do the little pieces, and we're just going to work on making it more user friendly for the community and adding in the things that we are putting forth and doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So any other staff comments? We've got Rob there. Who else is there? Evan? Who do we have? I can't even.
So Stephanie, just to refresh your mind with respect to the process for adoption, this is a legislative matter. So the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council. It requires a public hearing and they do the final adoption.
Okay. So does that help everybody understand? But so once we get it together, we'll move on through its process.
You know, Rob, you talked about the public hearing. I'm just wondering, do we see a window to get more involvement from the public before we actually go to that public hearing? Is there a way to do that, get more involvement from the public?
I think that's a good discussion item for this committee and for you and the council to decide. But yes, there should definitely be some public outreach.
Does that need to happen before we vote on it?
No.
Yeah, I think maybe we can also take these 2 months to figure out how we could do that. Because I think it's okay for us. We've got a general layout that works, and then we can start getting feedback based on that, because they'll know what they're giving their feedback on. We can present something to them I'm using my hands a lot, as a future map. You know, this is how we see this and what we've recommended, and we can get feedback based on that so that they know what they're giving it on, instead of just like, well, I'd like this over here and this over here.
I'm just wondering if I see what you're saying, but I'm just wondering if we have already all come to a consensus and voted and passed it on to the next committee, then does that mean we're not going to change when the public comes in and tells us, or, you know, are we going to go back and remap it when we hear the public?
Well, that's why I think that we would do it after. I mean, it'd be great if the public could all, you know, but we have to get it so that it's usable and that we're getting feedback that we can actually build upon. So the map we've done with the general, you know, painting broad brush of ideas, I think is a good place to get feedback on. If we just give them the map and say, so give us some feedback on what, that's going to be a nightmare to try to condense and combine. But I think having a broad brush idea, saying this is what we think works really well, and getting feedback based on that is something we should be able to work around, if that makes sense. So
I would think, you know, like us to see that we get a finalized map, what we'd like to recommend. And then between the time from the recommendation and the time the planning commission is making a decision, that this committee work with the planning commission to a public outreach, whether we hold some charrettes or some things that we can get people to, make comments on the map. And then it can simply just be some recommendations from this body with the planning commission, maybe one work session after that together. And then the planning commission can take it from there.
Now, I think it's the planning commission's position to hold the public hearings. Just my thought.
No, but I mean the public outreach, whether we hold meeting or charrette at the senior center or things like that this committee can help with, because this committee represents, can help get a lot more people there.
I definitely think we ought to be there and have the input, but I think they are the ones that ought to give the directive.
Yeah, okay. So we can think of ways of doing some outreach and discuss that a little bit in January, what we've come up with when we look at the final map and make that motion. All right. Mayor, do you have any other comments that you wanted to add?
Oh, thank you for staying focused tonight. Appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
And I just want to say thanks to the other committee members for their service and input, and just appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, everybody. I think we got a lot done tonight, so I'm excited. That is it. Do we have any motions to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay. I guess that's it, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
And
Thanks, everybody. See you
we'll
next
keep in
year.
touch through email, and we'll see you next year for sure.
Seems early to be saying that, but okay.
I know, huh? I'm like, man, I don't know. But stay safe. We'll see ya.